Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Elisa Ruffin with Leading Educators, and you are on the Grade 11 ELA Unit 6 video series. And I hope that you are ready for the second half of The Telltale Heart in Week 6, Lesson 26. Yesterday, we began the story, and you did a first read of the first half. You did some predictions and annotations, and today you get to compare whether or not those predictions that you made actually mesh with the conclusion of the story. You'll continue your first read, do some additional annotations, respond to some questions, and review some important parts of the plot of the story. But before we jump in, because I know you're excited about the end of the story, always remember that you are sharing your learning with a family member, caregiver, or friend. You're completing the weekly fluency activity using a page from the text and doing an additional 20 minutes of reading from the text of your choice. But before we get started in the end of the story here, it's time for us to jump into our Rebus puzzle for today. Are you ready for another one so we can get that brain all warmed up and ready to go? Are you ready? Are those around you ready? Well, then let's go after it. Today's Rebus puzzle, remember I present the image and then you are going to take some time to think about it before I reveal the answer. So our Rebus puzzle for today. Got it? All right. And the answer is holy water. Holy water. Now I want you to notice something here, ladies and gentlemen. I spelled the answer here very differently than what you'd expect. And I did so to reflect the literal meaning of this word. Okay. I do not suggest that you use this spelling in any other context though, but it was to prove a point, right? So you notice here holes and H2O make it holy water. Got it? All right, moving on to make sure we have our necessary materials in front of us. You need the Telltale Heart text, the Learning Packet Week 6, Lesson 26 note catcher, a pen or pencil, and a smartphone is optional or other device if you want to access the text digitally. A reminder of the background of the text here. It is a fictional short story written by Edgar Allan Poe. And remember, Poe was an aficionado on Gothic literature. Gothic literature was very much focused on death, gloom, and horror, and you probably got that impression as you read the first part of the text here. Definitely also was focused on those psychological thrillers. And you're not supposed to let the essential question leave your mind. What do stories reveal about the human condition? So keeping that in the forefront, along with our specific question for the text here, what sinister parts of the human condition does the Telltale Heart reveal? And yesterday you played around a little bit with the word sinister and did some brainstorming, so you should know exactly what that term means by now and whether or not you think it's a relevant one. Today's learning targets are the same. I can read and summarize the background and plot of the Telltale Heart. I can record my ideas and questions about the characters and events as I read the story. And as always, we are doing our read, think, talk, write, and close routine here. Just like we do every day, you are going to continue reading IL 4 and 5 from the Telltale Heart text. And you're going to continue with the same annotations that we did yesterday in the think box. And you're going to engage in a conversation with a family member, caregiver, or friend about the question, why do you think some people like suspenseful or scary stories? Are you one of those people that like suspenseful or scary stories or movies? If that's the case, then have you ever sat to think about why? Or maybe your family member, caregiver, or friend feels that way. Now you're going to talk about it and really examine what makes those types of stories so appealing. Then you're going to move on to the write section. And because you're done with the story, it is your opportunity to write a summary using the acronym that we've been using so far in our time together, SWBST. We will walk through a quick model of that to ensure that you are refamiliarized with the acronym since it's been a little bit since you've had to write a summary of a fictional text. And then you're going to close addressing the question, how suspenseful have you found the story, The Telltale Heart, so far? Explain your answer and provide evidence from the text. So this is you completing the story. So now you've read it in its entirety. What do you think? How suspenseful do you think that you have found the story to be? Now that we've got that overview underway, let's jump into our quick model. we are going to underline words, phrases, or sentences that describe the setting and give background information about what's happening when the story begins. We're going to box any unfamiliar words or phrases that you come across as you read the story, and write down any emotional reactions, opinions, or questions that you have about the character's behavior in the story as the story unfolds in the margins of the text. We're going to revisit our first half of our quick model from the first 2 paragraphs, just so we can see what we've come up with so far. So these are from yesterday. If you recall, we focused on the terms disease, acute, and hearken, and made sure we were clear on what they meant in the context of this story. We also talked about the overall sense that we got from the text, from the tone here, of desperation, madness of the narrator. And then we moved on to the second paragraph and looked at the last few sentences that finally gave us a clue about what is causing the narrator's rant in the first place. So remember, we talked about how we felt like we were dropped in the middle of this rant and really trying to orient ourselves into what's going on. And these last few lines gives us some type of context and helps us get our bearings straight. So now that we are clear on our first couple of annotations that we did from yesterday, let's build on from there and continue modeling our first read annotations. So we are moving on to IL4, starting with line 12. Please read along. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder. I say louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. So, let's talk about background and context, shall we? So we are underlining this sentence here. And now, at the dead of hour of night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. So this particular part identifies the current time of day and the location of the action here. So that, again, throws us back into the middle of the story. So we know where we are. We're in the house. We know it's nighttime. And we know that the narrator is still terrified. As we look at some additional words that we want to have context for and understanding for, refrained here. Refrained is a term that also means I restrained myself, I held back. Okay, so this idea of self-control. I also want to point out another phrase here. Do you mark me well? Do you mark me well? It's not a phrase that you hear at all. And you can definitely misinterpret it if you don't know. And this is critical, I think, to setting tone in the story. This particular term, or phrase, I should say, the narrator is asking the reader if the reader is paying attention and or listening to what he's saying. So instead of saying, do you understand me? Do you hear what I'm saying? He's saying, do you mark me well? So again, there's a dialogue happening here, but it's actually between the narrator and the reader to a degree. I also want to draw your attention to another word, although it's the same word we just defined in refrained. And I'm drawing your attention to that because it's used again. And repetition is never accidental. And it's always important that when you see a word repeated over and over again, that you pay close attention and try to get an understanding as to the author's intent behind it. So this is our first read. So I'm just really giving my first impressions about why I think this word is being used. And I do find it interesting that the narrator repeats the word refrained on one hand because it means to exercise self-control. But on the other hand, it is clear that he is not in control. So the fact that something is different than what it actually appears on the surface reminds me of a literary term. Irony, maybe? Think about that. All right, so now that we have completed reading another part of the text and doing some first read annotations, it is your turn to jump into the read, think, and talk for now. So you're going to pause the video, complete the read, think, think, and talk for today, and then come back and we will clarify the write and closing activities to make sure you're prepared for that. So go ahead and pause the video. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Now you know the end of the story. You know how it all plays out. How did your prediction fare? How accurate were you? What did you think about the end of the story? All right. So now that you have the complete plot laid out in front of you, it's time for you to summarize. So we are returning back to our acronym SWBST. You've used this before with previous texts. Remember, it stands for somebody wanted, but so then. Keeping in mind that somebody refers to who is the story about, so the characters. Wanted, what does the main character want? But, what is the problem or challenge the main character faces? So, how is the problem resolved? And then, how does the story end? So if you attend to each of those questions well, bringing in evidence from the text, you should create a really good and sound summary. Always keep in mind, though, that when you're writing summaries, they just briefly present the plot here. You're not divulging every single detail and retelling the story in its entirety. You're hitting the highlights there by responding to those particular prompts, and that you should not include your opinions. It's a straightforward summarization or retelling of an overview of the story. So keep that in mind. Once you're done writing your summary in your note catcher, you're going to move on to the closing activity for today that has you focusing on the idea of suspense. How suspenseful have you found the story The Telltale Heart so far? You're going to explain your answer and provide evidence from the text. So when I am thinking about how suspenseful something is, I need to think about points in the text that had me both kind of excited about what was coming next and anxious at the same time. And that I'm kind of on the edge of my seat. I'm worried, like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? I don't know if I'm ready. And also, what is going to happen? I really want to know. So that's that balance, that suspenseful balance that stories like this create for you. And it will also be helpful for you to think about how the author was able to create that suspense and hold it in your mind and make notes on that for later. All right. So one, identifying points in the story where I have that kind of uneasy, anxious feeling like, I don't know what's happening. And at the same time, I want to know what's going to happen. So I pinpoint those moments in the text. You may have already annotated about those moments. And then take a step back once you've identified those moments and think, how did the author do that? How did someone create that feeling for me in writing? And I want you to hold on to that as we move on. So now it is your turn. You are going to write a brief 5 to 7 sentence summary, again, using your SWBST model. You're going to close by responding to that question and recording your answer in your note catcher with evidence from the text. As always, if you need any additional help, make sure that you pause this video and replay it as many times as necessary. And if necessary, also, you can reach out to your teacher via email if you want some additional support and use this information provided. When you're done with the activities here, make sure you share your learning with a family member, caregiver, or friend. You complete the weekly fluency activity using a page from the text and do at least 20 minutes of additional reading from a text of your choice to round out your day. All right, so we have completed the Telltale Heart first read. We're going to get reared up for a close read next and really unpack what's going on in the story. I hope you enjoy the activities for today. And I'm looking forward to working on this again with you tomorrow.